guys. Let's see what kind of noise and disruptions we can make this week. Welcome to another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles with your host with the most, Travis Fowler Harkrider, and you know what we're here to do. So let's talk pro wrestling and get right into our weekly reviews. On Monday Night Raw, we saw the first face-off between Punk and Rollins, which then broke down into a physical altercation. And I think there was probably a couple of real punches thrown, or at least attempts from at least one side of those parties, but I think there was some true animosity that had been built up for a while that they both were like, hey, let's go ahead and let's try to get some of this out of the way. Then that led to Sami Zayn coming out trying to play a peacemaker, and later on that would then break down between Sami Zayn and Seth Rollins, setting up the night's main event of Rollins versus Zayn. Sign me up for that main event. Then we saw Finn Balor plead his case to Adam Pearce, saying that he deserved a World Heavyweight title shot, and he was then granted it, made official by Adam Pearce for Saturday night's main event this upcoming weekend. Balor and Gunter for the world title. Okay, cool. I really wish Balor would win this, but not just yet, because I think we are far from Gunter's reign being completely over. Then we saw a mysterious attack to Jey Uso. Like, someone decided to jump Jey this past week, but who was it? We don't know, but we had our suspicions, as did Sami Zayn, who would later go on to flat out say he thinks Rollins was the man behind the attack, and he's going to get his revenge in that main event. Is he right? We would find out later on. But then the biggest swerve of the evening. We have seen the breakdown of the New Day for weeks upon weeks. We thought Xavier and Kofi were about to go their separate ways. I mean, I sure as heck thought that, as much did anybody else did. And then, of all people to come back, to look like he was going to be the glue to bring these two friends back together, Big E coming out stating he is going to be at ringside for Kofi and Xavier's matches from now on to get back on the right track for the New Day. And what happens? They reject him. And not only do they reject him, they go into one of the most emotional, invested heel turns I have seen in quite some time. Both with valid points, both had a valid argument, and most importantly, both made an impact as a good heel turn, going from the New Day, who have been basically baby faces for the better part of that 10-year stretch, to going back to their roots. But this time it's not seemingly playful heels. No, I think we're about to get a serious heel team for the New Day of Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston. I'm all here for it, and I love how everything was executed. Can't wait to see what they do with this moving forward. Then in the main event, Sami Zayn, Seth Rollins had a fantastic match. Didn't end quite how most would have wanted, but it did end the night with the return of Drew McIntyre claymoring Sami Zayn into another county, and I can only imagine what his anger level and frustration is with Sami Zayn, and how many more are on that list for Mr. McIntyre. We will start to find out tonight on Monday Night Raw. Then we move on over to NXT, as this is the final NXT before Deadline that took place last night, which we'll discuss those results here in just a little while. On the episode of NXT, we saw the two final participants added to the Iron Survivor Challenge, one for the men, one for the women, respectively. On the women's side, Ren Sinclair picking up a fluke win, similar to how Ethan Page won the title a few months back in NXT, and she became the fifth and final participant in the women's Iron Survivor. Over on the men's side, Eddie Thorpe had made his case to stay in the Fatal 4-Way, and of course, he capitalized and was the man who was added into the Iron Survivor Challenge for the men's side. But something mysteriously happened to Eddie Thorpe too. Another mysterious attack here on NXT. Who did it this time, and was it revenge for Ava's takeout the week prior? Only time will tell on those sides of stories for NXT. In that same episode, we saw the No Quarter Catch crew become the number one contenders in a tag team battle royal, and they would go on to face Nathan Frazier and Axiom, the team better known to most on the IWC as Fraxium, this upcoming Deadline event. And we saw how that match broke down later on. Again, we'll talk more Deadline in just a moment, but I gotta say, No Quarter Catch crew was very impressive, not just on this episode of NXT, but on Deadline as well. We saw Eric Bischoff, the WWE Hall of Famer and very controversial podcast host, make an appearance over here on NXT to stir the pot between Trick Williams and Ridge Holland. I wish I could say that I was into the feud overall, but I really just hadn't been sucked into it, and I don't know if maybe it just hadn't been given enough time or what the case may have been. But Ridge and Trick just didn't do it for me. I know they tried their best here on this go home, but I don't know. Something just felt flat to me. So I think on this instance, this might be one NXT title match that just doesn't quite register with me, at least for this year in 2024. And man, I gotta say, overall though, NXT is a fantastic show from top to bottom. Deadline proved that last night. This show and almost every week has shown me that NXT, while it may not be the black and gold days that we remember, it is still a show that is worth checking out. The black and silver era that we have going on right now, some are calling it silver and gold, however you want to refer to it as, I really don't care. The point is that especially on the women's side, wrestling is so fresh and very well crafted. Shawn Michaels should be very proud as being the head booker, and Matt Bloom being a trainer there for the NXT Performance Center, the WWE Performance Center overall, and all its trainees should be very proud of what they have turned NXT back into, and in my opinion, it's must-see TV. Then over on the SmackDown side, Tiffany Stratton advanced to the semifinals, which I'm a huge Stratton fan. Miss Money in the Bank could become the first women's U.S. champion, but she is now in the semifinals. So the matches are set for this upcoming Friday here on SmackDown. On one side of the bracket, you've got Mi Chin going one-on-one with Tiffany Stratton, and in this instance, I really do hope that Mi Chin picks up the win because I believe she has earned her spot as one of the final participants. And then on the other side of the bracket, it is Bayley taking on Chelsea Green. Everybody knows who I'm picking in this one because I feel the same way about her as I do Mi Chin. Chelsea Green, they need to be the finals of this WWE Women's United States Championship Tournament, which will culminate at Saturday night's main event. Overall, I'd have to say I am picking this horse to ride all the way through to Saturday night's main event. Chelsea Green is going to be your first women's U.S. champion. Then we saw the Bloodline come out and make a statement with a beatdown assault and go on to say that many are not putting respect on their name, but they will continue to beat the respect into anybody, and they certainly were no shortage of that this past week. They may be down one member with Tonga Loa out with a bicep injury, out indefinitely, unfortunately, but I don't think it's going to be too hard to find a Blood member to come and join the Bloodline on this new rampage. Then the tag team titles were on the line this week, as it was supposed to be the Street Profits taking on the WWE Tag Team Champions Motor City Machine Guns. Unfortunately, the Profits had a little bit of a horrible situation and were taken out of the match mysteriously by an assailant. Once again, 3 attacks in 1 week. WWE, you need to step your security up a little bit, it looks like. But never fear, because DIY was here to fill in that spot. They would go on to face Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin for those tag team championships. Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa had been showing some dysfunction amongst their DIY team. But lo and behold, it looks like it was a ruse all along, and I think we know who also attacked the Profits. Johnny Gargano giving a low blow to his mentor, Alex Shelley, to set up the meet in the middle for Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano, your new WWE Tag Team Champions DIY, Also turning heel, I gotta say, for two of the most beloved tag teams in WWE's history. Granted, one through NXT in its golden years, and then one on the main roster. Both are so beloved amongst fans, and turning both of them heel in the same week. Bravo move, WWE. We already know what a DIY heel team can do when we saw Johnny make his turn to the dark side over in NXT for a little bit. So I look forward to seeing what they do with this new version of a heel DIY. And in the main event, we saw Cody Rhodes and Chad Gable, who had shown up out of nowhere. People wondering, why is American Made over here? Well, it wasn't necessarily to set up this main event, but this is what we got. Chad Gable, Cody Rhodes, as it was mentioned earlier in the night, Shorty G taking on Stardust. Who would have thought that would have been two of the main event caliber athletes we'd have as SmackDown headliners this year? It is what it is here in 2024. We are a long ways away from both of those other poor gimmicks for both of those gentlemen, respectively. Cody Rhodes picking up the win in a wonderful main event matchup. Prior to that, we heard Kevin Owens make his claims for, once again, why he is on the right side here, and it's kind of hard to disagree with him. He did that very informal car sit-down interview with Michael Cole that just disrupted into a way that he didn't appreciate, but he would make his presence known by coming back out and attacking Cody to end that show for the night and set up even more of a personal animosity between the two coming into this weekend's Saturday night's main event. Then over on the NXT, excuse me, it is overall a better show, but I definitely got this one mixed up here. AEW Dynamite this past week. Man, I gotta say, Kyle Fletcher, he's showing out, as is Shelton Benjamin, and them having the opening match for the evening was an amazing, amazing affair. Fletcher picking up the win over Benjamin and more points in his league for the Continental Classic. Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly are the final two in the Battle Royal to determine who will face MJF for the Dynamite Diamond Ring. The Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal, year two winners, will face off one-on-one this upcoming week at the edition of Winter is Coming Dynamite. Then Swerve Strickland dominated Max Caster, who's been doing this whole Best Wrestler Alive playoff of tag teams from the Acclaimed. It looks like we're going to soon see the Acclaimed have a split themselves, but Swerve made this guy look just like a jobber. And I know that was the point of it, but man, Caster got hit hard with Swerve with a Swerve stomp after the match was already over with Swerve as your victor. I don't think we're done quite yet with Max Caster and Swerve Strickland, and we're certainly not done with Strickland and Lashley. Then you had Jay White and Pac in a phenomenal matchup that saw Jay White, I believe, pick up the win in what was a hard-hitting affair. The Death Riders were outsmarted in this instance as well, as they tried another 3-on-1 beatdown to Jay White, who then had some backup with Hangman Page, followed up by Orange Cassidy, all getting their hits in and licks in on Jon Moxley himself. I think this is pretty much setting up the four-way for World's End and the AEW World title. Two women that I think do need to be recognized for their work, one of which had been off for quite a while. The other one had a Japan excursion and has come back better than she was before. Anna Jay and Penelope Ford taking on each other in an awesome matchup for the women. Two women that, again, were AEW originals that you can say were decent in the ring, but not really ones that make you stand out and watch them. And Anna Jay definitely has come into her own since that Japan excursion. And maybe this feud that they seemingly are going to build up between her and Mercedes Moné will only raise her stock further in AEW. Finally, in that night's main event, Claudio Castagnoli took on Brody King, where Castagnoli would go for a low blow and pick up more points in his league of the Continental Classic. Over on Collision, a couple things that I wanted to talk about was the assault to Orange Cassidy that was broke up by FTR. If they're going to get FTR involved in this with the Death Riders, this should be an interesting turn of events. But Darby Allin, of all things, doing Darby Allin things, That suicide dive where his back would then collide with the chairs. Oh my God, that killed me to even go back and watch the replay this past week. Or I should even just say this morning when I saw the video take place. It was insane to see Darby doing stunts like this still and just getting back up from doing it. Unbelievable. Props to Darby. I personally wouldn't be doing it, but also I'm not Darby Allin, who seems to be at another level of crazy in his own mind. Let's go ahead and move on over to the Deadline results because honestly, Deadline was an okay show. I'm not going to completely trash on it. The NXT World Title match, Trick Williams retaining over Ridge Holland, and what I really just could not get into as a match. Like I said, the feud itself just wasn't something I was highly interested in, and this match didn't really help matters at all. Both did fine for what they needed to do. It just wasn't clicking for me. But Trick Williams remaining the NXT champion. Also on that card, Frazier and Axiom defended their tag titles successfully against No Quarter Catch Crew, who really showed up to play. I really enjoyed some of the spots in this match, and Tavion Heights is a suplex lifting machine. Miles Bourne himself has come in to his own with the No Quarter Catch Crew gimmick. I think this team might be one to pay attention to going into 2025. And man, God, if there wasn't enough to talk about on the show, you had, of course, the 2 Iron Survivor matches that took place. But before I talk about the winners there, let's not forget about NXT Underground with Jada Parker and Lola Vice. These two had a wonderful feud building up to it. Some were a little disappointed with the match overall. I didn't really hate it too much. I kind of enjoyed the NXT Underground gimmick, even though I wasn't a fan of it when it started as Raw Underground with Shane McMahon. I think this is a nice little NXT exclusive thing, and especially with Lola Vice having her character built up through this match has been, in my opinion, genius. Jada Parker is very much a star that is just shining and rising every passing time you see her. I look forward to her doing big things in NXT as well as on the main roster when she eventually moves up to that level of competition. The 2 Iron Survivor matches, I felt like there was something off in the men's for a little bit. Specifically, it felt like Wesley was a little bit off on his game. Now, I don't know if that was the case or not, and I'm not trying to necessarily pass judgment. It just seemed like he wasn't moving at the pace that we normally see Wesley move at. So I hope everything's okay and that it's not necessarily an injury or anything that may be taking his focus elsewhere. Hopefully everything's okay with him. But overall, the match was very enjoyable. Obafemi was filling in a spot that Eddie Thorpe lost because of that attack from NXT ending out the show. Obafemi picking up the win in the Iron Survivor Challenge for the men, and over on the women's side in a great showcase, you saw Julia pick up the win for the women's Iron Survivor, which came very close to having a sudden death situation with each competitor having a fall. It was a very, very fun matchup to end the show, and Obafemi, I think it's pretty safe to say you're looking at your next NXT champion. Now, let's talk a little bit of some other news that went on during the week before we get out of here. Josh Alexander has fully opened up to saying that he is going to do some shopping around for his next home when his contract expires here at the end of February. I can't wait to see where he lands. He's even vocally stated that it would be fun to tag team up with Ethan Page again in NXT, reunite the North. That would be fun. He still could do things over in AEW, but personally, I hope he stays away from there. Maybe he signs with TNA. Maybe he goes to New Japan. Who's to say? But I wouldn't mind seeing the Walking Weapon show up in WWE. He's already said that unfortunately some talks with him as being part of the NXT crossover fell through, but that doesn't mean that we still couldn't potentially see it happen before the year's out or even at the beginning of 2025. But it'll be very interesting to see where Josh Alexander lives after he has his contract expire with TNA this upcoming February. Then, while we're on contract situations, Penta El Cielo Miedo is finally a free agent that we talked briefly about last week, where he lands pretty much everybody's open up to saying he's going to WWE. That's where he and Rey Fenix were scheduled to go earlier this year. Fenix, though, we know is going to be held at AEW for a little bit more time. And he even alluded that there could be some inhumane treatments that he feels like was done to him and potentially Penta during their time with their employer. Only time will tell and see what that unfolds when things start coming out for Rey Fenix and his AEW situation and how he feels about them. Another piece of business while we're on AEW subject, Ricochet making a huge statement that he believes AEW would not have been in existence had it not been for himself. Now, those weren't necessarily the exact words he stated, because he did try to say that guys like Kenny Omega and the Bucks and things like that should be very much given their kudos as well for them putting into that same style. But he very much, I felt like, was insinuating, and then later, yes, would make some sort of a similar comment of like, there would be no AEW if it wasn't for Ricochet. And while I have been in support of some of the tangents he's gone on, because I think some fans are just ridiculous and trying to give him crap for going over to AEW, and if he's happy, that's all that should matter. But making a statement like this, I think, is a little too much, my friend, because, let's face it, you weren't even with AEW, nor could you even make any other kind of bold claim, because you were signed to WWE when AEW launched, and if I recall, his contract had expired at one point before this past expiration. So I do believe he could have left even then. So why he didn't, I don't know. And maybe I'm making that last part up because I honestly can't remember completely. But I feel like he could have left a lot sooner than what he did. But oh well, again, as long as the man's happy, then great for him. I just think making such a bold claim of like AEW wouldn't have existed without me when you were already signed to WWE when they came into existence, I think is a little bit too much to say. Just my 2 cents, but again, as long as the man's happy and is enjoying what he's doing, all the more power to him. I enjoy seeing people doing things they love to do, and he's been having his killer matches over in AEW. So props to him. He's enjoying his time and career, so that's all that matters. Then another rumor has been addressed about The Rock not being penciled in for WrestleMania this year. This is coming from PW Insider this time as opposed to Dave Meltzer. So maybe there's a little bit more credence to this statement, but still, I made it a bold statement after I saw this news on my own social media platforms, and I am going to continue to stand by this until he himself, The Rock, says he will not be at WrestleMania. I take any news of him not being involved with nothing more than a grain of salt. I believe he will be a part of Mania one way or another. We all know what I'm hoping for, as what many people are hoping for. Rock Roman, the battle for head of the table, is definitely something we all still want to see happen at this year's WrestleMania 41 in Las Vegas. And while we're on the Meltzer subject, I really do feel like wrestling could kind of benefit from a true rating system, because I feel like there are matches that are left out of contention for 5 stars. And yes, I know it's a Dave Meltzer opinion. It's a Dave Meltzer creation, and opinions are subjective anyway, so why take them with any kind of credence? But I do think that matches should be awarded for the effort that both the competitors or multiple competitors put into it. So I've deviled with this, and I might actually in 2025 be producing my own star rating system, but actually based on criteria. What those criterias are, I have no idea just yet. I have a couple in mind, but that's why this is just an idea that I might be leading with here going into 2025. So stay tuned, my subscribers, as well as any new followers, because you might be seeing a much more enhanced star rating system with actual credence presented by yours truly. Guys, that's all I got this week. What do you think of my idea of introducing a legit star system rating into this podcast? Let me know in those comment sections down below. Did you enjoy NXT Deadline this past week? Do you enjoy NXT overall as a whole? Are you into AEW and their Continental Classic? And if not, what do you think they should be doing different? Let me know your opinions on everything going on in the wrestling world, even if we didn't touch on it here. Sound off. I love talking pro wrestling. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and have your bell notification on. Also, make sure you're following the Four Corner Podcast, because that is the page still currently on Facebook, but it is rebranded with all the Tights and Turnbuckles logos. Follow us on X, Tights and Turnbuckles there, and Instagram. You can also follow us on TikTok, which has been doing great numbers. And you can follow me personally over at X. That would be at Travis_T and ANDT. And I want to give y'all a heads up. Next week will be our final show for the year, because for both Christmas weekend as well as the New Year's weekend to follow, we will not be presenting new episodes of Tights and Turnbuckles, but we will stay up with the TikToks. So if you're subscribed over here on YouTube, make sure you're following us over on TikTok, because we will be throwing up videos during that vacation duration. But I will be back next week for the final episode of the year. So until then, have a great week, and y'all continue to love pro wrestling.